Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and I am back with what would have been the last video talking about the revealed cards, but we actually didn't see all 6 of the last cards since the last video until the expansion just dropped, as there was 2 cards that were not revealed until it came out. And as such, I'm essentially rolling in that video with what was another video that I was going to plan, where I talk about the nations as a whole and just give my thoughts on them overall. So let's just jump into it. We're just going to talk about every nation, what they got from Uprising, and the benefits that they overall got. So Germany, I think Germany got a fair amount of interesting tools. Alpine got a pretty noticeable buff, I think, with Pioneer. It's a good improvement to your consistency early game. And this card, if it drops turn 1 and survives, which granted it doesn't always, but when it does, it can get very quickly out of hand. And I think overall, the Pioneer absolutely finds its home in every single Alpine deck that you play. And I think it's just further adding that critical mass to it. Then we had one of the new cards, Through the Breach. This was a 1-credit German standard order. It just reads, deal 1 damage to a unit, deal 2 damage instead if the unit is in a support line. So this is essentially Tactical Strike, just tiny. And honestly, it's not that... It doesn't seem that bad. It's definitely not a massive card, but being able to deal like 2 damage to something in a support line for 1 credit can be actually be quite useful. Whether that is picking off annoying low health units. For example, think about stuff like little artillery units or like something like number 10 commandos that sits in smokescreen. And you can remove it now for 1 credit. And that's quite effective. It also pairs really well with some of the other German removal. For example, Root Out the Enemy gives all units -2/-2. So combine that with Through the Breach for 5 or 6 for 5 credits, and you can kill any unit you choose that has, say, 4 health, alongside the rest of the board clear effect. So we'll have to see, but I could see maybe 1 or 2 copies of this, being able to sneak its way into certain slower decks, in favor of just making it, just helping to combo with other removal tools, or setting up for like bigger removal things. Maybe there's even a reason for aggro to run this, help to like snipe off some annoying unit, or like help, it's a very cheap way to like blow up like an enemy unit. So maybe there's something there. I wouldn't hold my breath, but I think definitely Through the Breach has just enough going for it by just being so dang cheap that it probably will find some place. But I don't expect it to be like a 4-copy auto include. It's not a bloody sickle, but it's not awful either. And then we had Envelop. Envelop just seems like a great countermeasure. It's just very effective at what it does, being a giant missing. Again, I definitely can just see players just kind of running headfirst into this and just like, blowing up their entire front line because they're not playing around it. Can definitely be quite the threat in that case. And I think overall it's a pretty solid inclusion for slower controlled German decks. Notably with Lurking Danger, as I talked about before, this From the Deep and maybe like 1 or 2 other countermeasures could make a decent package to help like just have some like cheap ways to snipe big units or deal with threats. That's overall nice. So Germany overall, I think, got some decent control tools alongside a push in Alpine. They already have Fast Heinz, which is incredibly powerful, and I don't think any of these cards fit into that deck. Maybe the Pioneers do, but we'll have to see if they can make room for it. But We've seen a tiny bit of a slower German deck, and I think Through the Breach and Envelop could maybe inspire some different takes on that, or maybe slightly changes to how you run your removal package and whatnot. So, you know, uh, definitely expanding the horizons. And again, we'll also have to see how Alpine does. Obviously, Alpine, I think, just is getting boosted more and more, and we're getting, I think, close to that critical mass of good Alpine cards. Um, Otherwise, that's it for Germany in terms of their Uprising set. Let's jump over to Britain. I'm going to save the Polish card, or no, I can talk about those real quick. So Orp Orzel is, I think, a very effective card in a British-Polish deck. Being able to run 3 intel cards that aren't resourcefulness is quite impactful. Because this forced you into running commando units, and you didn't always want to do that, or you didn't always have the space. Orp Orzel gets around that by having its effect not be like anything specific or requiring specific synergy, just being like a nice little disruption tool. And I think that's a big boost to the deck, that you can cut resourcefulness. Or maybe there is a deck that runs both Orp Orzel and resourcefulness alongside other cheap intel cards and goes about it that way and just goes all in on, buffing legions or like playing through cheap intel orders with commandos. But definitely, I think Orp Orzel will push resourcefulness out of any deck that isn't already kind of playing their commandos. Then we have Overrun. Overrun was actually one of the cards that didn't get revealed until the expansion dropped. But it is a 2-credit British standard order, and it says attacking ground units deal damage equal to their defense this turn. So this is pushing a naval support deck, and it doesn't permanently last, but it affects all of your ground units, notably ground units. So this isn't going to work with like the 1/3 bombers from like the swordfishes or gladiators or anything like that. You have to be playing the ground units. I think this is not strong enough to really inspire naval support to take on a serious deck. There's definitely like times you could see this working. If you buff a unit decently, this can deal a lot of damage. Or if you just have a couple high health units, but the effect is overall just hard, I think, to use. And because it only lasts for your turn and not the enemy, so you have to be attacking on top of this. I think at lower ranks, or if you're playing the guard spam deck, you could probably make this kind of work. Like with Seaforth regiments and East Surrey regiments and a lot of the other high health, low attack guards. You move them into the front line. The enemy isn't really dealing with them because they're only 2 attack, 1 attack, and then you play Overrun, and then you smack them for like 13 damage or whatever, and that's quite a lot. Definitely seems very slow. And I would have my concerns about it just getting blown out by any like value deck or any deck that is able to reliably just keep you out of the front line. So I don't have the highest hopes for this. But it might be good in like some alternative format like Pauper, where the metagame's a little slower and there's more stat-wise units. Again, might be probably good in the naval support deck, but that deck is only for like lower ranked players. Otherwise, we have the Hurricane PL. We talked about this after seeing the entire set. It's definitely not going to see play right now. It's just a little. There's not enough there's not enough exile cards to make this worth playing. But I would definitely just keep an eye out for any 1 to 2 credit exile units, because those might work well with the Hurricane curving into it. Then we have the Inniskilling Fusiliers. This is a interesting card, and would be, I think, one of the big reasons to go full in on the intel. Because this is essentially another intel payoff, but it's in Britain, so it's not taking up Polish slots. And when we get to Poland, we'll definitely, I think, see that they are really cramped for spots. So I think that's where the Fusiliers really have their moment to shine, because it's kind of like Tarnow Regiment, but it's not taking up Polish slots. I think it's not as strong as Tarnow, but it's, I think, definitely a lot more potent. I think it's definitely could pair very well with it as a combination. Also, could bait out removal for Tarnow because you don't want this sticking around either. So, that could be a very interesting thing. Or, as I said, you could really lean into an intel heavy deck with just all of the 1 and 2 credit intel cards, and then just go full in on like using the Fusiliers on like turn 8, and then just like playing a bunch of intel. But yeah, otherwise, it doesn't have enough support outside of a British Polish deck right now. But maybe in the future we'll see this in like as one of the useful tools to play in like, say, a British US Intel deck. But that deck I don't think is quite there yet. And then we have the Churchill Mark III Avre. I think definitely one of the standout cards of the set. It is just a massive unit. It's a massive unit. I called it the British Leopold in my last video. I think it's definitely like very similar. I don't think it's definitely not as strong as Leopold, because Leopold always bounces everything. But this doesn't hit air units, and this doesn't bounce stuff in the front line. So it's only good if the enemy has a bunch of big units in the support line. And that does happen, but it's not always a consistent thing. But I think regardless, just the combination of usually being able to bounce a couple units in the back line alongside just such a massive unit is quite powerful. And I think the Avre will definitely find its way into most British control decks. So Britain overall, I think, definitely got a lot of support towards its British-Polish Legion deck. And then we also saw a little bit of support for a naval support deck. I don't think that's going to work out. And then it just got a really nice card in the Avre. That's going to probably become a staple of most of the nation. If it wasn't for the Avre, I definitely think Britain would look a lot worse overall, but I think because of it, it's probably one of the best nations to walk out of the set. Then we have Soviets. So they got... all 3 cards are actually right here. But we got 173rd Guard Rifles. We talked about this before. I think this could be a very interesting tool in an aggro deck. We'll have to see where that ends up, because there's still the worry of fast Hinds and whether this deck could keep up with that. It does have some potentially very strong tempo with stuff like Red Dawn, being able to blow up their early game tanks, and then also buffing up your like 173rd or the 456th. But we'll have to see if that has the power to consistently close games or keep up. But I definitely think if it does, it'll be largely because of the 173rd, enabling you to have a really strong turn 1 play. Next up, we have Upgrade. This card is very interesting. There's no Soviet 8 or 9 credit tanks, so this is actually unusable on the T-34, on 5 credit and 6 credit tanks, which is a big downside. Meaning that you're mostly wanting to use this early on or on cheaper units. There definitely is some benefit to various things, because there is some 7 credit Soviet tanks, so you could use Upgrade on those and always get an IS-2 out of it, and that could be something. But I think overall that this card it'll be interesting to see if this makes it in the Soviet value. I think you'd definitely be wanting to run a slightly different form than what you do right now, because this is a lot harder to justify compared to just running like Red Banner or even Ural Factories, as those hit anything and everything, and it's a little easier to work into it. But maybe we'll see a shift towards some more Soviet tanks, For example, maybe like mobile defense or the T60 starts seeing a little bit more play because of upgrade. That could always happen. Then we have the 175th Motorized. I definitely think the main place this is going to fit in is in a T34 deck alongside stuff like the 214th Amur and the T3476 Poland. I think in an aggro deck, the 175th is a little too slow. But I think that in the T34 deck, it's a nice combination with Amur, giving you more like ways to set up your powerful turns. This is better early on because you're able to get the T34s out, and then you can use Amur to make them operate for less and then attack with them. Notably, if you play this on turn 3, you can then play out a turn 4 like T3485, and that could be something, but as I said before, little bit slow. And that's still like a main problem of the Soviet deck, is that it's slow, so we'll have to see. I think the Soviets walked away with some interesting cards, but I think they're not the strongest set, which is fine. Soviets are very powerful at the moment, but they got some support to some archetypes and some things that don't exactly feed into any of their decks. Upgrade is the closest thing I think that gets into the current value lists, but I don't see it really making the cut right now. Or maybe I'm incorrect, or there's always a chance I'm incorrect and Upgrade is such a strong card that you're willing to kind of build around it, but I don't know, that seems not likely in my opinion. For the US, we have Red Devils. It is a 1 credit, 1/3. With Blitz, and then it costs that +1 attack. I think this is an excellent addition to any US aggro deck. Just being able to have an annoying unit that can test the front line is quite useful. And I think this just overall helps to feed a US aggressive deck a bit more. It itself as a 1/3 is not the biggest threat. But for example, if you compare it to Greyhound, I think it has some merit, especially early on. The Greyhound can attack and has some more uses later on, but Red Devils is able to really lock down the front line against other aggro decks, and I think that's a big benefit. If this ever gets the front line, you're probably going to have the front line for at least 2 turns afterwards. And that can be big. That can be a big amount of time. It allows you to either play more units and get them into the front line, further locking your control down. It sets you up for stuff like 99th Battalion and M4 Shermans. And I think overall Red Devils is just a nice overall card for more aggressive decks. Then we move on to one of the cards that was revealed in the last 6, 2nd California. It is a standard US infantry. It costs 6 credits, operates for 1, and is a 7/4, and then it has the text, when this unit is damaged, reduce the damage to 0 and give it -1 defense. So essentially, anytime this takes damage, it completely negates it and just takes 1 damage from it. This is definitely quite the scary card. And even if it's not competitive, I think this is going to probably get nerfed. This gives me big vibes of the 17th Rifle Regiment from the Soviets, which was a 6 credit 5/5 Blitz infantry, and then it healed itself and gained +1/+1 at the start of each turn. This card works so insanely well with buffs. For example, Weaken Do It gives it +3 times it needs to be attacked. And I think 2nd California is just like... I think the only thing that holds 2nd California back is that cost. If it wasn't for the fact that it was so expensive, this would probably break the game. But because of that cost, I think more refined decks will be able to deal with it. But if this ever gets into the front line, or this ever gets buffed and the enemy has to trade into it, you just win the game, because it's a 4-for-1 at the very minimum. And that's just crazy. I definitely think that's a really strong card, at least in terms of like new players. Competitive decks often can get around it by just punishing how slow it is. But I can also definitely see there are some decks that will absolutely just have no answer to this, and they will just have to trade into it and just take such massive value losses that they just can't do nothing. But let's skip over that to the final card, Mass Deployment. As talked about before, I think that the minimum you want to play this for is at 12 credit slots. That gives, I think, the bare minimum amount of value you want from this. But there is also, I think at 14 credits is where it really starts to get good, because that's when you start pulling, I think, in general, 3 solid units or 1 really big unit and 2 small units. And then anything over 16 credits, I think, starts getting silly. And then anything really above 16, I think is more so of a meme or is going to be rare to see. But obviously, it starts getting really, really strong. But I think overall, this definitely has a chance to see play, mainly due to the fact that it is several units within one card, which forces the enemy to board clear essentially just for this one card. Can be a very strong follow-up to some big board clear the enemy pulled off, instantly refilling your board with units. So overall, the US, I think, got a really nice card for its more aggressive decks in Red Devils. Second, California, we'll have to see if it's fast enough or if it's powerful enough to make its way into meta decks, but I think this is going to be a very, an insanely powerful card against new players, which might end up getting it nerfed. And then Mass Deployment, I think, has a decent chance of seeing play in ramp. So some of their strategies got support. Also, I forgot to talk about the Sherman PL. So the US didn't get an Intel card, so this is the only US payoff right now. And compared to Britain, I don't think it's enough. I would definitely keep an eye on this if we ever get a US Intel card, which I think probably happens at some point, because this is quite a powerful, beatdown card. It just lacks the, any more support around it. I don't think it's a strong enough draw for a US Poland deck. I mean, maybe there's a chance that, you're just looking to use Legions as, a controlling option, and then maybe the Sherman just gets slammed in there just because. But otherwise, I don't think it really has a chance. So, I think US got some nice cards. I don't think it got anything super insane in terms of making it, a meta tyrant. But I think it overall walked away pretty happy with the expansion, with the decent sets expanding its decks. So Japan got new doctrine. At the moment, as I said before, I don't think there's enough support to make this a legitimate card. There is Frank, which is that Japanese 5-credit plane that could have some fun memes with it. You use bolster with this, and then use new doctrine, and then you use the fury and you just kill the enemy from hand for 30 damage, or 20 damage. I mean, apologies. So there's that, and I also got thinking there could be an interesting bolster deck, a Japan US bolster deck, and you run stuff like the 28 centimeter coastal howitzer, and then you bolster it and just completely dominate the board. And then if the enemy is not doing anything, you play new doctrine on it and then just start smacking them for 7 damage with your big artillery piece. That is a lot of cards to fit into, so you definitely don't want to run, I don't think, too many doctrines in that type of deck, but 1 or 2 copies could allow you to turn your otherwise only control only tools into I'm going to kill you cards. So that may give it a purpose. Matsu Regiment did not have any more support in the mini expansion, so it's, I think, on average going to be just a 3-credit 3/5 infantry guard, and I think that's not bad. I think the fact that it's giving you redundancy in your targeted discard is quite nice. But I don't think there's enough payoffs in a discard deck to be worth running. Supply chain is nice, and the Bettys are nice to just come alongside Matsu, but I don't know if that's actually going to maybe it's a package you run. You know, you run Matsu Regiment supply chains, uh, special deliveries, Betty, and even stuff like experimental flight, and then you just have like a bunch like, and that's kind of like a draw engine for the deck, and then you also just get to cheat out like some bombers and generate some decent guards and like some extra planes out of your deck, while just power cycling through your deck. Maybe that's something in like a Japan US control list, but that's a lot of slots for it. So, it'll be a question of whether or not it's strong enough or it has enough draw power to outclass other options. But that would be the main place I maybe see Matsu in. And then we got Banzai. Banzai is a 7 credit. Was that 7 credit elite? It was a board clear. I definitely think it is very powerful in Japan French resistance. Just being able to blow up your entire enemy like ground board outside of like a couple big units is really powerful. And I think that in most Japanese control decks it will be quite useful. I saw some people talking about whether it might make its way into an aggro deck as like a last chance to turn the board around, but I don't think so. End the turn means that even if you play this, like the enemy just has a chance to rebuild. But I think as a control tool, it'll probably see play. I think Japan sadly walks away like one of the weakest nations. A lot of the tools are interesting, but they don't have the foundation they need. Japan Control, I think, got an excellent tool, but Matsu and New Doctrine are in very untested things, and we'll have to see if their decks or if their packages become worthwhile enough to use. I would say Matsu has a higher chance of seeing play than New Doctrine. Because self-discard might be an actual like draw package in a control deck, and then sometimes you just cheat out like early bombers and alongside like a Matsu, and that's a strong turn 3 play. So then we didn't get any French cards, we didn't get any Italian cards, so let's talk about Poland, the last nation. Let's start off with saying that Poland definitely walked away the best nation. I think just by far, I think it just got a ton of very solid and strong tools. And I've tried building some Legion decks, and I've had too many cards I've wanted to include, and that's usually a good sign of the power level of a deck, is that you have so many cards you want to put in, you have to make cuts of what seems like really strong cards. So, first card, Hell. It is a card that was revealed. It is a 1 credit special Polish order. It is Intel 1. And it gives your Legion units, they get +1/+1 when they survive combat. So that is very similar to something like the 5th Legion's Regiment, but only for the actual Legion token. But it's essentially a double buff. For 1 credit, you give all of your Legion units +1/+1, and then any that fight are going to get an extra +1/+1. So this could be 1 credit +2/+2. For trading. That could be really powerful. And this could be a very strong tool to, just cheaply buff up Legion boards. Combine that with like Orp or Zell, and you have, 5 ways to buff up your Legions for 1 credit. And they can get very big very fast now. Speaking of which, Orp or Zell in Poland itself is a fine card. I think it actually gets outclassed by Hell. Unless you're running it with Britain. I think it's insane in Britain. It's a little less insane, I think, here. I think Hell is the better Intel card if you're looking for 1 credit. Although, if you're looking for just cheap Intel, Orp or Zell could be an option, or the TKS could be also. You have a lot of 1 credit Intel cards now, so maybe that combined with a couple ways to make Legions could be something. It definitely depends on what you're looking to benefit from. But I definitely think Hell is the best of them. The TKS is interesting because it has the biggest intel, and it also is a little unit, so it could maybe help trade a little bit. Orp or Zell is only just increasing the cost of a card in hand by 2. Very random, and it doesn't have the benefit of working with like British ways to increase costs in like the cost of cards in the enemy hands, so the effect is less impressive. So we'll just have to see. We had 74 Silesian. I think this card is very strong as an anti-aggro tool. I think its biggest weakness is that it is just not having enough slots in Poland. And I think that speaks well to the power of Poland, that a card like this might just never see play because there's so many good Polish cards. But if you're not playing Legions and you're playing Poland for whatever, Silesian is a very good anti-aggro card. Could be interesting in the right deck. We talked about the Hurricane PL. Again, there's not enough cheap exile cards, and I think that really hurts the Hurricane. Keep an eye on it if we see a 1 or 2 credit exile card. The M4 Sherman PL. This is a card that I don't think you run in Poland slots. And you would only run it, I think, in a US Polish deck. And as I talked about before, I don't think this is a strong enough pool to go directly within that nation compared to just like going Britain. And I don't think it's strong enough to have it run in Poland slots. Poland slots are contesting a lot for Legions. I guess if you're only running like an Intel card with like Daring Strike and like just Tarnow just to have like card draw, maybe, but like it's so easy to just include like Legion cards in your deck that I don't think the Sherman makes the cut. Then we have the last card, and this is the biggest one, Uprising. This was a card that didn't get revealed until the expansion dropped, but whoo boy, this seems like one of the best Polish cards. 5 credits, it's a special order, and it says, deal damage to target unit and all other units equal to Polish units destroyed this battle. So, if 2 Polish units have died this battle, this is 5 credits, deal 2 damage to all units. If 4 Polish units have died, this is 5 credits, deal 4 to all units. This is essentially just really powerful. Legions has a bit of a swarm complex. Stuff like Plan West and Tarnow Regiment make a lot of Polish units. So if those die and get blown up, this is also might be a reason to run TKS, because it's a Polish unit, so it feeds into Uprising while also working well with a Legion card. But Uprising, I think, is very powerful, and really is going to be like one of those cards that you might have to cut something very powerful in favor for it, you know? Maybe like you don't run as many Plan West because you want to put in Uprising. Or maybe it's so strong it even pushes out like Tarnow Regiment or Underground States. There is definitely, I think, a lot of power, and Poland is going to have to really make some tough choices when building its decks. But otherwise, that is it. Those are the cards of Uprising. My predictions are we're going to see a British-Polish Legion deck really jump up in play rate. I think that's going to be one of the strongest decks. I think that's the one deck that I have high confidence will jump. I think a lot of other cards are also going to find its way. German Control, for example, I think got some nice tools and might jump in play a little bit. You know, the U.S., maybe Ramp can make a comeback with like 2nd California and mass deployment punishing slower removal-based decks. But overall, that's going to be it for today. I have already been building several decks, and I'm going to be trying them out. And we'll have some deck techs for Uprisings in them soon, you know, probably next week after I've had the weekend to play it. Make sure to like and subscribe this video, or like this video. Leave a comment down below. What card are you most excited to try out? Also, if you have any deck lists that you find you really enjoy after watching this, leave them in the comments also, and maybe I'll try them out, and you know, maybe I'll make a video on them. And beyond that, also make sure to subscribe to not miss the upcoming deck techs for the various Uprising decks. I got a lot of ideas. But otherwise, that's going to be it for today. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and have a good day. See ya on the battlefield for Uprising.